everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. My name's Maeve, and I just mainly wanted to welcome you all here. I'm really glad to see a big turnout because it's such a beautiful day, and most of you were probably outside enjoying that. I know I was. So we have just a couple of announcements, and then we'll launch into the program.
Okay. I'm sorry. Hi, good evening. I'm Barb Bryson. I'm one of the board members, and we just have a little bit of business to do tonight before we start the program. So any members who have not yet voted on the new name, you can do that tonight. Cecilia has pieces of paper with the name choices. Just write your name on it, please, because we're making sure nobody votes twice. And make your choice and put it in the box at the back of the room before you leave, okay? And people on Zoom can vote on email at outreach@laneaudubon.org. Also, if anyone has a phone, there is a QR code that links to the correct email in the back there on that little sign. Okay? So 3 choices and only members get to vote. Thank you. It's exciting.
Well, good evening. I'm Dennis Arndt, and I'm the one who kind of organizes the program meetings. So I'm glad you're all here. This is really nice. It's an exciting meeting. I've always wanted to do a meeting about the Swifts and everything, and this is great. Glad you're all here. Before we do tonight, though, I want to tell you a bit about next month. Next month, we're going to have Sue Anderson here. If you recall, she gave a talk last year about this same time about butterflies in general, and she does an amazing job. She just explains things very well, and humor, all kinds of things. It was just so well done. I asked her to come back this year, and she agreed, and she's going to talk about the amazing monarch migration. And we've all heard bits and pieces about that monarch migration and how they do it over several different, they die and then the offspring go the other. I don't know how you'll find out next month. So be sure to come. That'll be next month. So tonight, it just seems so obvious that we should have done this a long time ago. Maeve, Sowles, and Dick Lamster have been going to observe the Swifts at what was Condon School a long time ago. It's now Agate Hall, near campus, near the track field, Hayward Field. Terrible. Anyway, I'm just so glad that they were doing that. And Dick has been associated with Lane County Audubon as long as anybody has. He came here in the late 70s, became the president of Lane County Audubon in 1978, and continued as the president for many, many years until his wife, Maeve, took over in about 2002, and then Maeve has been doing it ever since then. So they are the real history of this organization. And even though the name is going to be changing, the organization is staying the same. We're still doing the same things. It's still the same great organization it always has been. And now we get this chance to have these 2 people who have been the anchors of this organization speak to us about one of the things that they've been doing so often and have so much knowledge about, and that is those Vaux swifts that come to this chimney in the fall and the spring in great numbers. And if you've been there and seen them flying into that chimney, it's just awesome. So we're going to have a chance to get the background on all of this and find out how it all works. So let's give a nice warm welcome to Dick and Maeve.
Thanks so much, everybody. Really good to see such a big crowd. I mean, I thought with spring break and all, nobody'd show up, So I am Maeve, and like I said, I'm really glad to see you all here. It's wonderful to have a nice turnout. I have one question for the audience. Is there anybody who's not seen the swifts at the chimney? Oh, good. We'll get to engage you and get you turned on for the upcoming migration. So that's really a good aspect because otherwise everybody will probably fall asleep. So anyway, we did open a couple of the doors because it is pretty toasty in here. So hopefully nobody will fall asleep. So the program tonight on Dennis actually came up with the title Our Amazing Swifts, which is kind of a personal thing, but that's okay because we do feel invested with the Swifts at the Chimney. They bring us a lot of pleasure and excitement, and hopefully you'll feel the same way about them as we proceed. So this is what it looks like when the Swifts are dropping into the chimney. It's when it's still and quiet and you're just looking at them, it's sort of not very dramatic. But when they're swirling around in the sky and chittering and flying around each other like the maniacs that they are, you wonder how on earth they keep from running into each other, for instance. And I think only one time in all the times we've been there did a bird actually land on the ground, and it apparently had a collision, and the people ran over to us and said, oh my gosh, and actually I don't remember the outcome of that, but it doesn't happen very often. I know that for sure. And by the way, there's a couple of these photos that don't have notation on it, and Dennis Arndt took these photos. The ones that I didn't put his name on it. I'm sorry about that, Dennis, but thanks for the photos. So we had the first slide talking about the Vaux swift and the size of the bird, but I also wanted to give you a little bit of a review about the other types of swifts that you might see here in Oregon. And the white-throated swift is one that typically is either in Eastern Oregon, or I have seen them along the Rogue River when we were doing a river trip rafting. So they tend to nest and roost in rocky, craggy cliffs and such. So they have a different habitat mostly, and don't have the same phenomenon of using chimneys, for instance. I'm not really aware of any being sighted around Eugene per se, so I think they tend to be more of a Eastern Oregon, Southern Oregon, rocky cliff type bird. But they are bigger than the Vaux swifts, and that's one thing to notice. They also have the white on the front and then the white on the back of the rump. So they are, the Vauxes were only a little over 4 inches long, and these guys are significantly longer, and their wingspan is about twice their length, so almost 14-inch wingspan. And then the black swift is another bird that is not usually seen in our area, in Eugene, for instance, because they tend to nest under waterfalls, and there's not that many waterfalls, of course, but the only place I've ever seen it is up Highway 58 at Salt Creek Falls. And they, like the other swifts, they're really good flyers, and they eat insects all day long. When they do build a nest back behind the waterfall, then they're out foraging most of the day. And even if you go to look for them, you wait and wait and wait, and they don't necessarily show up. It's a real long shot to get to see one of these birds. But then sometimes late in the day, they'll fly in at the very end, and that's when they're feeding their chicks, is kind of what it appears happens with them. But they're actually quite a bit larger, 7-inch body, and I think their wings can be up to like 16, 17 inches across. So they are a little bit of a bigger swift. They're also quite dark, and the size difference is significant. But they don't have any of the other same sort of habits that allow us to see them very often. So the Vaux swifts are, look at these. One of the things I like about having the photographs of them, if you go to the chimney and you see 15,000 birds, you never see a look like this of one of the birds. You know what I mean? And so they don't, they're just not an accessible bird in that way. Like they don't come to your feeders and perch on the trees, things like that. But they spend all day flying and hunting insects, And they're native to the Pacific Northwest and further north and south in the big forested areas. That's what they evolved and adapted to, is using big old tree snags to nest and roost in. So the fact that they've adapted to using the chimneys is probably the only reason we get to see them at all, because typically they'd be out in more a wild area, in a forested area. So they're the smallest of the North American swifts. And look at how big the eye is. Their eyes are quite large. That's because they're hunting for insects on the wing, and they hunt also very high in the sky. And then when they open their mouth, it's like the whole head opens up almost. You know, think of some of the other birds that are insectivores. They have quite a large gape. So it makes them much more efficient for catching insects. And then the swifts do spend most of the day literally just flying and eating bugs and on the wing. They don't perch, like I mentioned before, and they don't come to feeders. And the only ones that I've seen on the ground was one that, you know, either a chick that fell out of a nest or in somebody's fireplace, or ones who are injured. But so normally we only see them flying, and they have a very characteristic flat, fast wing beat and fluttering. They'll sort of stall and go catch an insect when they're flying, so it's erratic flight patterns. And they also fly very, very high in the sky. So sometimes I might think I hear one, but I can't see it, and then I realize that it's way, way up there because there's insects up there. There's insects that actually move on the wind currents that a lot of us aren't really aware of. But the swifts know about that. And I also like this photograph because they do come down to the water. And as you know, like in the rivers and reservoirs, there's a lot of insects around the water because they need the water for their reproduction and everything. And so this bird is flying just, you know, right across this, almost it is skimming the surface and looking for insects. You can also sort of see the tail splayed out there, and there's little pointy things that come off the back of the tail. That's part of the adaptation we'll talk about later for them to be able to perch in the chimneys. And that I was going to mention, you can see them around the rivers and the reservoirs. So that's another place you can look at them, look for them. So their sound that they make is a very high-pitched, twittering sound. Many people, if they have some hearing loss, they can't even hear them when they start to come gathering around the chimney. But it's a very characteristic sound, and once you kind of are aware of it, then you can recognize it if you're in the right season, because they're not here at all in the winter. We're waiting for them to come back for the spring right now. The spring migration should bring them into town. We hope every year that they'll come back for a visit. And when they do return in the spring, it's for reproduction, and they come in a large flock, as we've mentioned, and then they pair up right away. There have been a couple studies that they do maintain pair bond over the winter and come back and pair with the same bird, assuming they both make the migration going south and coming back again. And then when they do mate, they do it flying. They're flying as they mate. They also have a bit of a display courtship thing. It talks about the wings making a V. And so you think of like mating birds on the land that have dances that they do and so on. Well, for the Vaux's swift, they just have these formal wing positions that they take. And then the male comes and approaches the female and quickly connects with her back. And it says they glide together very briefly, and that's it. They're done. And so they must have to do that several times because they're going to lay eggs. So anyway, it's not something that most people have ever observed. Maybe she hardly notices. I don't know. The other thing is see the mouth on this bird, the bottom, the chin area beneath the beak. Normally the beak would be sticking out quite a ways. This bird has a mouthful of spiders and insects that it's probably foraged in order to take to the chicks to feed it. And that large mouth that they have also can expand and allow them to carry all of these insects that they gather throughout the day. And then the next slide will talk more about the number of insects they can eat. But this is a good slide showing that. It also looks a little bit rumpled feathers and stuff. So it sort of tells me it's probably an adult with chicks that it's trying to take care of their babies. So on the nest, another thing that I find fascinating about these birds, since they never land and perch anywhere, they simply just are not equipped to do that. They, both the male and the female will fly over treetops, and like in the spring right now, where the leaves aren't really out on the tops of trees, they'll break off just little tiny bits of branch tips, and that's what they use to build their nest. And then they glue that with saliva to the inside of a chimney or a tree snag. They prefer a tree snag. That's what they evolved to nest in, is big old tree snags. So they would use those if they can find any, but they also have adapted to using the chimneys for nesting as well, including residential chimneys. Anybody here have had swifts nesting in their chimney? 1, 2. Okay, it is pretty cool when they do that, although we do get phone calls about people that are bothered by the noise. And also occasionally, so there's a few things that we tell them. Number one is close the damper so that none of the birds will fall into the house and then end up in the house. And then what are you going to do, So if you close the damper, then they can ultimately climb back up on the brick chimney. Yeah, they're very good climbers on the bricks like that. That's how they get in and out of the chimney. And so anyway, they do build the nest with the twigs glued with saliva, and you can see the sizes, 4 inches by 2.5 inches. And both parents feed, and sometimes they have an assistant, another adult that's not paired up, that will also help them. And then, an adult feeding the young will go out and catch more than 100 insects with the stuff in their mouth like that one had. And then they go back to the chicks and feed up the babies, and then they go out and do it again. And I've seen this number in a few different sources, that they'll catch up to 5,000 insects a day. So they are busy parents. And it's amazing to me how efficient they are and how much energy they have to expend when you think about them literally flying pretty much all day. So I find them rather fascinating. This is a chick that fell, and it was taken to the Portland Rehab Center, and they were able to, get it back to health and hopefully got it ready to fly. But this is one of those precautions I mentioned earlier. If you have a nest of swifts in your chimney, they're only there for like less than 3 weeks. They're pretty quick. Once they lay the eggs and hatch the eggs, you would hear the chicks, but the time interval is not going to be forever. And then the parents will feed them up and they'll leave, and then you'll probably feel like lonely that it's so quiet around there. But if you do see a swiftlet on the ground, and we've had calls like this over the years where the parents, maybe it tried to fly and that didn't get high, or it hit something, it just didn't have it together. So the best thing to do is to try to recover it in a way that you can put it where the parents can still feed it and maybe get it out of harm's way so it's no longer on the ground. One couple, we talked about what the situation was, and they said they had a ladder, the parents were still there, so they were able to get the chick up to the roof and to the edge of the chimney and put it there, and the parents were feeding it. And so that's, the best case scenario, that because they need to learn from their parents, they need to figure out what it means to be a Vaux's swift. So I like it when we can get a good outcome like that, but because they'd be very vulnerable to cats or dogs or any other sort of predator. And so and I wanted to mention the Bird Alliance of Oregon did have a lot of good information on their website about what to do if you find a baby Vaux's swift. So the migration, that's what we're looking forward to in the spring. Spring migration is always one of those times when I think about all the hazards that they have to go through in order to make it from their wintering ground, and then coming back all the way up here for finding a place to nest. And they will be arriving mid-April and then continue on north where they will find their places to nest and raise their offspring. There will be some that stay in our area, but then others go on north. I'm going to show you the range map in just a minute. And then in the fall, when they go south, because of the breeding season and they come to the chimney, is the point of reference we have as to how they're doing. Is if they didn't come to the chimney, we'd have no clue. But the numbers that come to the chimney are greater numbers than the ones that come in the spring, because they have their chicks with them. So yeah, and we had that one number last September. We counted over, almost 16,000 swifts that went into the chimney, which was a big number. And it took them like an hour and a half to go in. It was it was a pretty tight squeeze for them to all make it in the chimney. So this is a range map, and you can see on the middle, this map here, the yellow is the area, again, where they want to go for breeding season. So in the spring, that's their target area. And most of that, all the way up into British Columbia, would be historically forested areas. And by historically, I mean that may or may not be true anymore. A lot of the forested areas have been logged and changed. And so the pinch, is kind of got on these birds that really depend on big old trees for nesting and roosting. But then their migration route goes through Central California and Eastern California. And then down at the bottom, Central America is where they go for the winter. So that's where they've been all winter, in the nice, warm, balmy, insect-filled skies of Central America. And then they'll be making their way back up here. And the black dots on this map are other roosting sites that the birds use to roost in as they make their way north. There's some, in the LA area, San Diego area, and then some others. Now, these are ones that are identified and known to host birds, but there's probably other smaller ones as well. One of these dots is also a big old snag that's like in the big forested area along the coast in California. And so they still use an old snag for roosting, and there's people who do counts there, and they have a lot of swifts that use that snag, which is kind of cool. So a little bit about Agate Hall Chimney. It was built in 1924, and it was had a boiler room next to the chimney that was used to heat the old Condon School. And I think that school was in use for like 40 years or more. I don't remember the exact date when it was deactivated as an elementary school, but then the University of Oregon bought it. And they had discussed potentially removing the chimney because of seismic hazards, but they had it evaluated by engineers some time ago. I forget what year that would have been, when they put the band around it and the stays that help hold it up if there were an earthquake. And that's part of the sort of ambiance now of the chimney, is it has this band around it that holds it up. So I'm really, and many people are happy that they chose to do that. I think it's probably cheaper for them to do that than it would be to take it down, and there wasn't a justification to take it down. So the other thing about this, so in 2013, I actually used to work at the university, so I got a couple of these photos from people I knew there. But in 2013, they knew that they had a lot of guano in the chimney. They didn't know how much was in the chimney, but there was leaching coming out of a couple of access doors, and they didn't really want to open it and check it out, And but they did decide they needed to get rid of all of that. So they hired a hazardous material organization to come in, and they did a lot of preparation and masked up and vented and put all this guano. It was 25 feet big, big amount. And it's kind of funny too, because I knew people and they said, we'd want that for our garden. You know, that would be so cool to have in the garden, but the university didn't want any part of that. So anyway, we still have Agate Hall Chimney. The other thing I thought was really, I think these bricks are beautiful. You know, it's like a work of art almost, how nicely done they are, and they're still holding up nicely. And the Swifts need these old chimneys because of the bricks and that they can cling on to. New chimneys that are built like for industrial purposes and stuff, they don't have any bricks in them. They're all smooth concrete that are very slick and slidey because it won't catch any debris, you know, of whatever's going out the chimney. So new ones really won't fill the bill for the birds. So these were a couple of pictures that I found online showing the birds in a couple chimneys. I don't know which chimneys they are. They didn't have them labeled, but it does give you a feel for just how cozy it gets in there for them. And, you know, as you know, things like bricks and rocks and sand absorb heat. You know, if they're in the sun all day long, they're absorbing heat. And so one of the things that happens then, especially in the spring or the fall, when the temperatures start to drop at night, the birds go in there and those bricks are still giving off heat through the night, and it helps them to stay warm. And the other thing about these birds is because they're like just a flying machine, they fly, fly, fly all day, they burn a lot of energy. And so there's stores of, they don't probably have very, you know, big fat stores or anything. They eat insects all day and they fly all day. So they need to preserve their energy at night. That's why this roosting phenomenon is really, really critical for them to survive. Otherwise, they'd just be exhausted and not really be up for breeding or up for migrating and things like that. So they literally do cling to the sides of the chimneys. And some people have talked about them like attaching to each other, hanging on each other. I don't think that's what they prefer. I think that they want each to have their own little spot where they can hang. And I'm going to show you a couple of their adaptations now that allows them to do this. So this bird, if you look at the claws under the body, they're hanging on to the chimney. Let's see if I can, whoops, I didn't want to do that. I went the wrong way. It's this one. Nope, it's not that one either. Never mind. So point to you have your pointer. Yep. Dick has a pointer. There you go. Those are the claws. Yep. And then the tail adaptation over here. So the tips of their tail feathers have the little ends of the feathers that come out like a little nail almost, that allows them to kind of boost their hindquarters up. And then those claws on their feet are a little bit forward on their body. And the question he wants me to ask you is, what other bird does that remind you of? Bird. He said a bat, but woodpeckers, yes. That's what, you know, woodpeckers cling to the sides of trees in a very similar way. They have strong feet, and then the bottom of their tails have a little adaptation to help boost them up. So all of that strength isn't on their feet and legs. But these birds are, you know, designed to do what they do, and they do it very well. So I just find all of that very interesting because they're just so different than other birds that we hear about. So the one of the nemesis for the Vaux swifts, and everything's not rosy all the time for them, is the Cooper's hawk that often waits for them on the top of the Agate Hall Chimney, and that's who this is. It's one of the local Coopers that nests near the Vaux campus, and many years when I'm thinking, well, the swifts are coming, I wonder if they're here yet, because unless you go by the campus, I don't always know. If I go by and I see a Cooper's hawk, I'm like, they're here. If I don't see a Cooper's hawk, I said, no, too early, they must not be here. But the Coopers definitely let you know if the swifts are there, because the Cooper's hawk needs to eat. And there are other birds that also are part of that. The other predators that are pretty common. For us at Agate, Cooper's is the most common that we've seen there. We have also seen sharp-shinned hawks. And last year, a peregrine flew by, and we've also seen crows fly by, but they're a little less dedicated to going after the swifts because the swifts are really hard to catch in the air, and the crows seem more intent on getting to their own roost in the evening wherever it is they're going. So they haven't been a big hazard to the swifts at Agate, as far as I know, but I've heard of other places where the crows are very diligent about going after the swifts. So it's sort of a regional thing or the particular flock or whatever they're doing, you know? And then, so the swifts have to navigate trying to get in the chimney with the Cooper's hawk there. And invariably, they'll get one or two. And in the spring, we've seen the Cooper's hawk grab one and then head towards the Pioneer Cemetery, I think, where they have a nest site. And then a few minutes later, they come back and maybe get another one and then go back again. If it's fall, the Coopers would tend to just take it to a tree close by and eat it. And like I said, they have to eat too, but it's a little bit hard to see that after these little birds have been, you know, doing their thing all day and then they just want to go to bed. So anyway, the swifts it does delay the swifts going into the chimney. If the Cooper's hawk's there, they fly around a lot longer than they would if the Cooper's hawk were not there. We're going to talk about counting swifts, and Dick's going to do that to help you guys understand just what that means and what the drill is for counting swifts. Do you want this?
You didn't tell me this was going to be an X-rated show. Mating on fly? Wow. So you don't have to count swifts to enjoy it. Very few people do, but I do. Maeve does. One way to do it, my friend Dave Stone said, count the wings and divide by 2. Some people use a clicker. I do not. It's harder for me to manage. I use note cards and slash marks. Maeve does too. It's best to have 2, 3, 4 people and then average. Are you doing it right now? We don't count by ones. We count by hundreds. Is the video going yet? No. For the slash marks, we go, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, put a slash mark. But when we're doing the slash mark, there's already probably 10 or 20 birds went down. Then we start about 20 or 30, go to 100, put another slash mark, etc. The way to do it is you have to look at the top of the chimney. Don't pay any attention to this. That'll drive you nuts. Just pay attention to the top of the chimney. And then you start counting as soon as they start going in. And it's pretty wild. In fact, it's really wild. I did some analysis of our old counts. How long does it take them to go in the chimney? So if it under 1,000 birds, it can do it as quickly as 3 minutes, 8 minutes, 2 minutes. Between 1 and 3,000, 9 to 12 minutes. 5 to 7,000, 19 to 30 minutes. 7 to 9,000, 50 minutes, a little more. 9 to 11,000, 17 to 20 minutes. Goes up and up. Last year, like Maeve said, the biggest group we saw last year was 15,990, and that took 68 minutes. And it's a little tiring. You get a little dizzy a little bit. You have to look away. People want to talk to you, which is fun. We love to talk to people, but you can't do that and count birds at the same time. So if you're inclined, once you look at it, if you're inclined to count, come see myself or Maeve or both of us, and we'll help you. Now, how accurate are we? Well, we're pretty accurate. and Maeve and I are pretty close. One of us is the same person is almost always higher than the other person, but that's just the way we do it. We were about 20 years ago now, but a graduate student at the University of Oregon was there with an old video camera while we were there counting with our flash marks. And a couple of days later, he told us what he counted by taking it back to the classroom, slowing it down, and counting them. Compared it to what we had measured, it was almost the same. So at that point, we knew we were pretty darn close. So that made us feel better. Now, we haven't had that done since, so maybe, I don't know. Anyway. Let's see, what else do I have here? That's pretty cool. So it's mandatory when you come watch Swift, you have to go get an ice cream cone too. That's the, well, in fact, you get one before, you get one after. It's okay. We've had we're up to 3 generations now, people coming to see the Swifts. Little kids, their parents were brought by their parents, and their parents were there like 30, 40 years ago. That's pretty cool to have 3 generations. People come and take their vacation or to visit relatives during the migration. So they can see that migration here at Agate Hall. So it's quite a family event. This woman over here said she likes it because it's free. The ice cream cone is not free, but it's just a fun thing. People bring sandwiches. They bring little kids are playing. They bring their dogs. Yes, ma'am. We don't know. We doubt it. They land where they want to. Yeah, good question, but I don't think anybody knows. I doubt if they go to the bottom. I mean, why they don't know how many are behind them. They don't know. They just find a place and cling. Yes, sir. The best answer is yes and no. Has anybody taken one when they're in there? What's been the results? Oh, but yeah, not at Agate, but I think part of it is they're a little worried about the camera might disrupt the birds. Most, especially old cameras, used to make a noise, and they're pretty sensitive to that. Maeve said it has a high frequency sound. I can't hear that. Some of you guys have been in there. I can't hear it, but Maeve can. So I don't need to because I have Maeve. But it's quite loud. When you get 15,000 birds all doing this little sound, it gets pretty loud in there. So, you know, if somebody wants to put a camera in there, the university might let them. I probably wouldn't recommend it, but it's curiosity, but we know they get in there and we know they stay for the night. Coming out in the morning, you're going to talk about that? So coming out in the morning is a whole different thing. So when they come out depends on the weather. If it's rainy and cold, they may not come out till noon, but usually when the chimney starts warming up again, it's really when the insects come out. You got to think about insects. That's the whole thing. They go to bed when the insects go to bed. They get up when the insects get up. Otherwise, why bother? It's food. In the morning, so when it starts warming up, insects start getting out. They'll work their way out, and then they get to the top. They kind of jump off, catch air, and take off. It's kind of like a teapot boiling over, a pot boiling over. They kind of come out, boiling over, take off. It's pretty cool. Trouble with that, you don't know when it's going to happen. It really depends on the temperature and the insects. But if you ever see it, it's really cool. You've seen it several times. I've seen it a couple. Is that all the time I have? I'm done. Any questions on that? Okay, you got to go. Oh, yeah.
First reported that Swifts were using that chimney?
When were the Swifts first using the chimney? We're not positive. There used to be another building, an old church on 17th Avenue in about Columbia. Maybe some of you remember that. Where's Villard? Thank you. There you go. That chimney was used by Swifts. That church was sold. The university bought it, turned it into a storeroom, a storehouse, and capped the chimney. So about that time was when the university bought Agate Hall. So we think it was probably in the late 70s. Do you know when do you know? Have any idea when the church was sold or yeah? So
then that's at 15th and Lamar.
Okay.
Grew up in that neighborhood.
Okay, well, this was another one more on 17th. It's a parking lot now. It's a huge parking lot off of 17th. Yes, it was.
A warehouse.
Yes. Yep. So to answer your question, we're not sure, but 70s. Before any of you were born. No.
Thanks, Dick. I was going to say that we are always open to having help with the counts. And one of the reasons is we love doing it, but we live outside of town and we have a couple dogs and we don't want to make the trek into town every night, or, we plan a couple of nights to do it, but having more counters is always a positive thing. So we can talk about that later. So I'll just keep moving. One thing that happens with the, one reason we do the counts is for our own curiosity, but also there's this organization, Vaux is Happening, run by a man named Larry Schwitters, who began compiling the data from all of the chimneys that the swifts use. And he's got a website, and there's a data tab up there. There's other information up there. And he collects the numbers from all those little black dots that I showed you on that other map. And he does a big analysis of those chimney counts. The thing that's a little challenging, I put this up there, but I wasn't going to delve into much more than that as far as he's concerned from the standpoint of what we're doing here tonight, but you can always look at his website for more information. But this is a tally from the counts that we've done and other people have done here at Agate over the year 16 years, starting in the fall of 2008. That's kind of when he started launching his program and was soliciting to get other people involved. And so starting, 2008, you can see the numbers there. And in the spring, that would have been before the fall, there was no count in the spring of that year. But subsequently, the fall of 2009, then the spring of 2009, they correspond to the same year. The other thing is, so the number of swifts is the big tally next to fall and next to spring, but then the number of counts is literally like, so on the top line, there were 2 different counts, potentially by 2 different people, we don't know. And that's the total number of swifts that were counted in those 2 days. So these are like the number of times that it was counted. And then if you do math with this, you can see like the bottom line, 83,800 swifts counted by 8 different, days. That's a significant number going in each time probably. But what you don't know is one of those counts might have been very low and another one very high. So this just gives you the totals. But if you're kind of a math geek or you want to do more sort of analysis, it's a little tricky because this is truly just a citizen science kind of thing. It's not a scientific study in the sense of, data that you would be able to do like some analysis with and have a margin of error, because the margin of error is kind of whatever the people give you. And, one person might count differently than another person. Yes. That's another question, isn't it? Maybe. Yeah. That's true. The numbers, well, and there are chimneys that have people there every night. How they manage to get that many volunteers, I don't know. But so some of the chimneys have like 100,000, birds, but it's because somebody's counting them every night. So that's why comparing the data in this type of study is almost impossible. You had a question? Good question. That was mortifying actually, because we expected to see swifts coming first of September. No, but no swifts. People were there 10 times and there were no swifts. There's right across the street, there's a fire station. So I went over there and I said, did you guys ever see any swifts this year? Because they have dinner right there, watching the swifts. So they said, you know what? It was the Labor Day weekend and it was early that year. And there was one night when like a couple thousand birds came through and they were there one night and gone. So they were like skyrocketing south for whatever reason. I don't, nobody knows, but that was, scary for those of us who were kind of worried about the birds. It was a lot of fires in British Columbia, and they might have just been like running for their lives, kind of feeling, needing to get someplace where there's water. Yeah, so the numbers are pretty amazing, and the amount of work and time that goes into it. But, that's the other part of this is it's also just a labor of love and fascination and amazement about these little birds and how cool they are. And then the other thing by the way, I want to thank Dennis Arndt for those nice videos that we just showed you, because he took those this last fall, and it was really fun to be able to see the birds flying into the chimney. So that's Dennis again and his camera. So when you go out to see the swifts, and those of you who've not been there, I hope you will come out this spring and try to take it in. We plan a day, we try to have an event twice in the spring and twice in the fall. And so we'll be there later in the spring. I forget what the date is on that. We were going to have one on the 4th of April to catch the early birds in case any come early, but there's a track meet, and it won't be very amenable to counting swifts when there's a big event at Hayward. So we just nixed that. But anyway, so when you go out, folks come out, lay on the grass, bring their chairs, they bring their friends, they bring their family, they bring dogs and kids, and, get Le Prince Puckler ice cream. It's usually a beautiful evening. It can also be raining. So there was one night when we were counting swifts, and it rained the whole time we were there. Fortunately, we took a canopy and an umbrella, and we counted under the canopy. But it can also be a moonlit night and watching the swifts fly in front of the moon, which is pretty cool too. So please come and join us for one of our Swift events, and I don't think you'll be sorry. The one other thing that comes to mind about that is I used to live in Hawaii, and I had friends who came to visit me to see where I was perched here in Oregon and what I was up to. So we took them to see the swifts, and they said, if this were in Hawaii, there'd be tour buses lined up all the way down the street, and they'd be selling tickets. So that's true. This is such an amazing thing to see. It's just mesmerizing, and it's joyful. And so we could all use some of that, right? Anyway, this is another side of the story, which is this is a picture taken in Texas, and the birds these are chimney swifts, but the story remains the same regardless of which type of swift it is. They had flown north across the Gulf, whatever name that is, I can't remember right now. And the chimney that they were aiming for was gone. It had been dismantled over the time before they came north, and they were clinging to the side of this tree, just trying to stay warm, trying to stay safe, but so vulnerable. And it was pretty heartbreaking, because if their chimney's gone, they have no place to go. They don't have a plan B. There's no like Swift's welcome here kind of sign for them. So anyway, the chimneys make all the difference in the world for them in this day and age when they don't have snags anymore, and it's intrinsic to their survival. And so if a known roost site is capped, it can mean that they're really going to lose their whole migration is going to be vulnerable. I heard about this happening also in San Diego, where a chimney wasn't torn down, but it was capped. And the birds were seen the next morning by people. They were perched on the outside of the chimney, just, hanging on for dear life, and, really kind of tragic for them. So anyway, the university actually is well aware that the swifts use this chimney. They know about the hordes of people that come out there and hang out in the parking lot and stare at the sky. And and they have committed to cleaning it out with some regularity. But I really think it would be cool if they put a placard out there, an informational thing where they honor, this important function that chimney serves for these birds. And I mean, I know people on campus who have talked about that, and we've tried to sort of get that moving through the system a little bit. But I'm telling you because I don't know how much longer I'm going to be around, but somebody needs to keep pushing that a little bit harder to make sure that this chimney is preserved for posterity and for the birds. And so I just want to put that out there. And you can build your own swift chimney if you'd like to. It's on my husband's to-do list. But it's been there for a long time. I don't think that's going to happen. But anyway, the swift and all the swifts are insectivores, and they're very dependent on their diet. Their livelihood is eating bugs. And so one other really risky phenomenon is sort of indiscriminate use of pesticides, spraying, for instance. How they will do broadcast spraying, and insects fly through that. And if it gets eaten by a swift, then they just swallowed however much of that toxin, poison. It makes them very vulnerable to that type of indiscriminate use of pesticides. So that's another pitch for trying to think through how important it is what we do impacts these birds. Will this just start, Dennis, or do I push something? Do we know? Okay. We can skip it. So actually, that's the end. But thanks so much for coming. Other questions? Yeah, there's one right here.
Chimneys and roots like this, or is it most likely swift?
Swifts is the one I know about. Yeah. Do you know anybody with? Yeah. Yeah. And then they'll only be there about 3 weeks and then they'll be gone. So if somebody's worried about it, and people do cap their chimneys because they don't want the bother and all of that. And, people all have their choices that they make. But if you can talk them out of it, at least during that particular nesting season, so they can complete their nesting cycle, that's the best thing for the birds. Back there, I'm sorry, I'll come. The 3 weeks is when they're nesting. If they've gone in, they built a nest, and they have their chicks, and it's a pretty short cycle before they're going to be off. Dick had them nesting in his chimney.
Noise is for 3 more weeks when the babies are out and about being fed. So it's actually about 6 weeks.
But you might not know they're in there until the babies. Yeah.
Babies are being fed and they're hungry and they act just like all little babies. They want food. Feed me now.
Sorry, yes.
They make that decision. Is there a leader that says we're going down now? It's like,
No, I mean, people ask all these questions. Who decides when they're going in? And then they'll say, do they always go this way or do they always go that way? It's like, yeah, they do. So we just know so little about, but they're such a flock animal, and we had a couple of physics professors that were out there one time talking about, the flock behavior. And, there's been studies done on that. So like this murmurations with starlings, for instance. And so the birds are constantly watching their wingman, you might say, the one right next, so that as long as each bird pays attention to the one either to the right or left, or right or left, then they don't run into each other. So they're hardwired for this phenomenon. I mean, they're very successful at doing that. Those flying patterns, watching them fly, it seems miraculous, but it's just they're well adapted to what they do. Barb.
Mentioned that I had to cut down some fir trees that have died. And if you need to cut a tree down, you can ask your arborist to leave a standing snag like 15 feet tall, and within a short amount of time, you'll get woodpeckers, and I don't think we've ever seen swifts, but.
You know, for the audience online, I wanted to say that Barb just mentioned that when they've cut trees off their property, they've left snags there, which they're fairly good-sized trees, and they do allow for cavity nesters, and potentially they could turn into snags as well. So that's good to know. I'll try to repeat the questions or the answers. Yes.
Every night is a street of birds moving through. We not know that.
We do not know that. And I actually, Dick and I disagree on this to some extent, but I believe, but just logic in my mind. So one thing that's very important to these birds is the wind direction and the temperature. And so when they're coming north, they want a wind from the south, a warm, balmy breeze coming from the south, because they don't want to fight a north wind. They don't want to fly into the cold. And the opposite's true in the fall. And in the fall, one thing I forgot to mention is there's a lot more swifts at the chimney in the fall because of all the young ones with them. And those young ones, just some of them just hatched, or some maybe hatched a month before, they need to fatten up, you might say, get their muscles tuned up, get, themselves ready for the big migration. Because once they go from one chimney, the next one might be, a couple hundred miles away or more. So I think that they optimize their time at a safe roost site, but then again, they're waiting for the weather to change. If the weather's warm and nice and everybody can get enough to eat around the rivers and the reservoirs here, they might stay at Agate. But we don't honestly know one bird to the next because there's no way for us to know that. You can't, there's been some studies where they tried to tag the birds or put bands on them, but the recovery of those kinds of things is almost negligible. So, did you want to say something?
Yes. They don't fly as a flock of geese. Don't think of that. They're flying almost as individuals, maybe small family groups. So if we're flying, 5 of us are together tonight, we may never see each other again. They may take off, we may stop. So don't think of it as a flock of geese. It's just like a river of birds. And sometimes it's the same bird, sometimes it's not. I may fly 100 miles, you may fly 200 miles.
We just don't know. So, yes.
The question is about an observation. We used to do it for many years near Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and there were chimney swifts there.
Mhm.
And there was an effort kind of west of Milwaukee to restore a chimney. And there was a fundraiser, and then I got the money. I don't know all the details, but the good news is that people in other places are also trying to support the swift migration habits.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And there've been, so one chimney was capped or taken down in Corvallis. And this man, Larry Schwitters, and the Corvallis Audubon folks sprung to build a new chimney just for the swifts. And it took, there's been, well, I don't know if the swifts have ever actually adopted that chimney. Do you know? Oh, yeah. It would be, I'm sorry?
See, it was an old flour mill or something.
Yeah.
All in disrepair.
Yeah. So it's possible that they would. And I've also read about some places down in either Texas or somewhere where a chimney was taken down. So they started building all of these art deco structures along Main Street, and some of the chimney swifts did start using those. So it is something people can do as an alternative if a chimney's lost, and that's good to know about. Connie.
I noticed in some of the maps, they were quite hard. I assume it's a tremendous source of insects up there, but I wonder if they also have second nestings, because they're pretty quick in there.
So the question is about whether they have second nestings, and I haven't read about that. There was a researcher, like the Birds of North America, the big tome double issue thing. The main researcher on Vaux's swifts from way back was a woman named Evelyn Bull, and she did a lot of studies, but she wasn't doing just observational. But I don't remember her reporting about that. I would have read about it too long ago to remember, I guess. So, sorry.
So hard to see a nest inside a cavity. They gotta climb the tree. I don't think they really know. They have a short nesting period, so they probably don't nest twice. That's the ideal condition.
Yeah, this was a question about nesting twice, and we don't really have an answer for that. Back there, Brian? Poop happens. Yeah. And also, so he's talking about standing out there watching the swifts with your mouth open going, wow. And people have been pooped on. Don't you have a t-shirt that it's bird poop all over the shirt? Yeah. And the speciated identification. So, if you're watching birds, yeah, these things happen. Good point though, Brian. Someone else? Yes.
Besides the fox and the black swifts are different genus than the white-throated one. I just was wondering if you knew how big a family this is, how many genuses are there?
I was hoping somebody would not ask that question, because I don't have that in my brain. But anybody here? About how many genus are included in the family that
Worldwide.
there's a lot of swifts in the world. Yeah. Yeah. So, yes,
Maybe. Pardon me.
that's okay.
Have the birders cooperated from, let's say, San Diego to Portland to follow the migrations north and south? The wave, I'm hoping for the wave to come.
Right. Well,
reach me.
you know what we have now is eBird. So I start looking at eBird. It's the electronic sightings, that people post when they're out bird watching, and they'll identify what birds they've seen, especially a first of the year bird, for instance, which right this time of year, a Vaux swift would probably be the first bird of the year for them. And they post it on eBird. And I did check eBird this morning, and there have not been any Vaux swifts posted for our area yet.
Not here.
No.
How about south?
Yeah, LA area, San Diego area, yes.
Well, I'm hoping for tomorrow when the big south wind.
Well, we'll see, but it's going to be rainy too and colder, so the birds might not like that though. Yes.
First dates and last dates here in Eugene.
I don't have that in my brain. No, I don't, sorry.
You post it on your website.
If we start seeing swifts, we'll put it on Facebook for sure. Yeah. And definitely let people know they're back.
This for Lane County area that Tom Mickle has done, I think you can find on the Oregon Birding Association webpage that says when the first Oregon warblers got the swift. So that is available online for first. Last is harder. People don't pay as much attention to the last thing. You have to be doing a good job of taking notes.
It's hot. It's tricky.
So, but there is charts. You get a pretty good sense of when they usually.
Feedback.
Yeah, so the question had to do with where can you find first and last birds sighted of the season? And Vera mentioned the, yeah, but what was the website again? Oregon Birding Association online. Tom Mickle posts those. So I think we should probably call it an evening here. Really appreciate everybody coming out and hope to see you at the Agate Hall Chimney one of these evenings. Thank you.